In the years before 1939, the city of Krakow had a reputation for academic and cultural excellence, with an ancient and historic city centre. It had also been a centre of Jewish spiritual and cultural life since the 13th century, with around 56,000 Jews living in the predominantly Jewish quarter of Kazimierz. There were synagogues, churches, places of business, shops and homes, with the people of Kazimierz, both Jewish and non-Jewish, going about their daily lives. However, with the rise of Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler, this would all come crashing down, and no one could have foreseen the horrors that will be unleashed in the coming years. On the 1st of September 1939, the German battleship Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Polish military depot at Westerplatte, just north of Danzig. This was followed by a full-scale invasion by the forces of the Third Reich, and German troops crossed the border, and despite the gallant actions of the Polish forces, the country was overrun in a matter of weeks, with thousands being murdered. Part of Poland was under the general government, which set up its headquarters at Wawel Castle in Krakow. Given Nazi Germany's anti-Semitic policies, there were immediate punitive measures against the Jewish population: imprisonment, the wearing of armbands with the Star of David, and the destruction of synagogues. Special permission was required to live and work in Kazimierz, and those who didn't have it were forced to leave the district where they had lived for so long. By December 1940, approximately 43,000 Jews, willingly or unwillingly, had been deported from Kazimierz. On the 20th of March 1941, the Krakow ghetto was established in the suburb of Podgorze across the Vistula River. The Jewish population of Kazimierz was forced across the river, carrying their belongings with them. The ghetto was surrounded by a wall built by slave labourers, and the tops of the walls were deliberately made to look like Jewish gravestones to add further insult to the inhabitants of the ghetto. This is one of two small sections of the wall that remain, and there is a plaque with an inscription in Hebrew and Polish, which translates as, "Here they lived, suffered and died at the hands of their German torturers. From here they began their final journey to the death camps." The day-to-day running of the ghetto was in the hands of the Judenrat, or Jewish Council, who were responsible for the allocation of accommodation and the issue of identity documents and work permits. Order was kept in the ghetto by the Judenordnungsdienst, who were equipped with a hat, armband and a baton. They were nominally part of the Judenrat, but took their orders from the SS. Some 16,000 Jews were forced into an area which had originally housed some 3,500 people. This number increased over time. Rations were meagre and starvation was commonplace. There were frequent identity checks, and the Jews were forced to undertake manual labour. From May 1942, deportations began to the death camps. The population was gathered in Zgody Square, and those chosen were forced onto the trains taking them to the death camps such as Belzec. In 2005, Zgody Square became a monument to the ghetto heroes with the installation of monumental chairs. These chairs symbolise the furniture and other effects left behind by the Jews deported. Some of the chairs bear photographs in memory of these victims. There are also photographs of those from more recent events in Israel. As well as manual labour in the ghetto, Jews were forced to work in private German-owned businesses. Perhaps the most well-known is the German enamelware factory owned by Oskar Schindler, who developed an affinity with his Jewish workers and saved many from the death camps. The 14th and 15th of March 1943 saw the final liquidation of the ghetto. 2,000 people deemed fit to work were sent to the nearby Plezhov concentration camp. Another 3,000 were sent to the Auschwitz death camp. Some 2,000 not fit for work were simply killed. Perhaps the most infamous of the death camps was Auschwitz-Birkenau, and some 1.1 million people, including 1 million Jews, met their deaths here. Prisoners were taken by train and unloaded onto the ramps. Here those fit for work were sent to the barracks blocks to be worked to death. Those unfit for work, including women, children and the elderly, were driven by the guards to the gas chambers at the far end of the camp. Here they were forced to strip and were herded into the gas chambers, believing them to be showers. They were gassed to death with Zyklon B and the bodies then cremated. Plezhov concentration camp was just a few kilometres from the ghetto and was built on what was a Jewish cemetery. Little remains of the camp now, as like many other camps it was destroyed as the Allied forces advanced. Where once stood barracks and factory buildings are now piles of stones and rubble. The roll call square, where prisoners were made to stand for hours at a time, is now a grassy field. The only building still standing is the so-called Grey House, which had been used by the management of the Jewish cemetery and later by the administration of the camp, and had cells in the basement. Plaques show where some of the other buildings stood prior to being demolished. At the time of the ghetto liquidation, the camp commandant was the infamous Armand Ghost, who delighted in taking potshots at the prisoners from his balcony. The museum site has many memorials commemorating those who died here, both Jewish and non-Jewish, and those not only from Poland but other parts of Europe. The largest of these is the Monument of the Torn Out Hearts, a massive monolith with 5 figures representing the 5 countries of the camp's victims, with a large horizontal crack across their chests, symbolising their abruptly ended lives. The camp was an industrial complex with businesses such as the Madrish clothing factory, but one of the main activities was quarrying, both inside and outside of the camp. The Laban quarry lay to the north of the camp, and its machinery can still be seen ominously rising up like watchtowers. The machinery now lay silent in testimony to those who were enslaved and forced to work and die here. As you walk through the quarry, it is paved with stone, and on closer inspection some of these have Hebrew inscriptions carved into the face. The concentration camp's roads were paved with gravestones from the original Jewish cemetery as a way of adding further insult to the prisoners. However, I was not being disrespectful, as these are replicas made for the film Schindler's List, which was filmed in part in the quarry. Krakow was liberated on the 18th of January 1945. Unfortunately, it was by the Soviets and Poland came under communist domination. It was not until the rise of the Solidarity movement in the 1980s and the fall of communism in 1989 that led to freedom for Poland. After the war, Amon Goth was tried by a Polish court and sentenced to death. He was executed by hanging on the 13th of September 1946. Oskar Schindler was not successful in business after the war and was financially supported by Jewish individuals and organisations. In 1963 he was accorded the title of Righteous Among the Nations by the Yad Vashem Institute. He died in 1974 and is buried in Jerusalem. Today, Krakow is a large modern city with the historic centre at its heart. Its squares and streets now echo to the footsteps of tourists rather than to the sound of the jackboot. The Jewish district of Kazimierz is a busy tourist destination and has a slightly bohemian air. Today, Kazimierz has only about 1,000 Jewish residents, but signs of its past can be seen in the synagogues and cemeteries. There is little to show of the terrors of bygone days.